It was 3 years ago, the night of my very own engagement party. I was wearing my beautiful dress, walking through the venue, looking everywhere for my fiancé, Mark. We had been together for 4 years, but I couldn't find him anywhere in the main hall. As I searched, I walked upstairs and pushed open the door to one of the guest rooms, and my entire world completely shattered beneath my feet. Mark wasn't alone in the room, and the girl who was intimately wrapped in his arms was none other than my own younger sister. My whole body was shaking. Crying uncontrollably, I ran straight downstairs to my parents. I thought they would stand by my side. I thought they would throw my sister and Mark out of the house. But do you know what they did? My mother looked me dead in the eyes and said in a chillingly calm voice, "Your sister truly loves Mark. You just need to adjust and let them be." They didn't just betray me. They literally kicked me out of my own home that night, just so I wouldn't cause any drama at their precious new couple's wedding. They thought I would wander the streets crying. They thought I would be destroyed, but they were wrong. So wrong. Today, exactly 3 years later, I am the CEO of a $100 million tech empire. I am now in a position of power that my greedy family couldn't even dream of reaching in a lifetime. And yesterday morning, the security desk at my luxury office called me. They said there was a woman crying in the reception area, desperately begging to see me. I looked at the CCTV camera feed on my laptop and saw my little sister. The same sister who stole my fiancé 3 years ago, the one who took my parents away from me, was now standing in my office, crying like a beggar. And do you know why? Because that very same husband of hers is now completely bankrupt and standing at the doors of federal prison. And the only person in the entire world with the power and money to save him is me. I know, this story of my life might sound like a movie to you, but this is my absolute, harsh reality. And something inside me is telling me that you won't leave me halfway. I know you will stay and listen to my story until the very end. I just have one small request for you. If you are listening to this story on YouTube, please show some love and subscribe to my small channel. And if you are watching from Facebook, please hit that follow button and stay by my side. Your little support gives me so much courage to keep going. And please, don't forget to let me know your thoughts about my journey in the comments below. So, without further ado, let's begin the story of my life. My name is Sarah. And if you had asked me 3 years ago how my life was going, I would have told you that I was the luckiest woman on the entire planet. I want you to picture the perfect evening. The backyard of my parents' massive estate was covered in fairy lights. There was a live jazz band playing softly in the corner, waiters walking around with expensive champagne, and all our friends and family laughing and celebrating. It was my engagement party. I was wearing this breathtaking, custom-made emerald green dress that I had saved up for months to buy. And then there was Mark. Mark was, well, he was everything I ever wanted. He was charming, successful, and he had this way of looking at me that made me feel like I was the only girl in the room. We had been dating for 4 years. 4 years of building a life together, planning our future, talking about what we would name our kids. Let me ask you something. Have you ever looked at a person and felt an absolute, unquestionable sense of safety? Have you ever thought, this is it? This is the person I am going to grow old with? That is exactly how I felt about Mark. I trusted him with my life. But there was another person at that party who I also trusted with my life. My younger sister, Chloe. Now, every family has a dynamic, right? You probably know what I mean. In my family, Chloe was the golden child. She was 3 years younger than me, but she always got exactly what she wanted. If she wanted a new car, my parents bought it. If she failed a class, my parents blamed the teacher. She was spoiled, manipulative, and used to being the center of attention. But I didn't care. She was my little sister, and I loved her. Plus, tonight was my night. For once, I was the one in the spotlight, or so I thought. Around 10:30 p.m., it was time for my father to give the celebration toast. I was standing near the stage, holding my glass of champagne, waiting for Mark to come stand next to me. But he wasn't there. I looked around the crowded lawn, scanning the faces of our guests. I didn't see Mark. And then I realized I hadn't seen Chloe in a while, either. At first, I didn't think anything of it. Maybe they were inside getting a drink. So, I excused myself from my friends and walked into the house to look for him. The downstairs living room was empty. The kitchen was empty. The music from the backyard was slightly muffled inside the house. I walked up the grand wooden staircase, thinking maybe Mark had gone to the upstairs bathroom to fix his tie. As I walked down the long, carpeted hallway, the house was dead silent. But then, I heard something. It was coming from the guest bedroom at the very end of the hall. The door was cracked open just a few inches. I heard a soft giggle, a familiar laugh. It was Chloe. And then, I heard a man's voice whispering something low and husky. It was Mark. I want to pause here for a second and ask you a real question. What would you do in that exact moment? If you were standing in a dark hallway on the night of your engagement and you heard your fiancé and your sister behind a closed door, what would your body do? Would you run away? Would you scream? Because my body just froze. It felt like someone had injected ice water straight into my veins. My heart started pounding so hard in my chest that it physically hurt. I told myself, Sarah, you're being crazy. They are probably just talking. My hand was shaking violently as I reached out and slowly pushed the bedroom door wide open. And then, my entire universe completely collapsed. The room was dimly lit by a bedside lamp. Mark's expensive suit jacket was thrown on the floor. His tie was tossed onto a chair. And there, on the guest bed, was the man I was supposed to marry, completely tangled in the arms of my own sister. They were kissing. But it wasn't just a sudden, accidental kiss. It was deep. It was passionate. It was the kind of kiss that proved they had been doing this for a very, very long time. The champagne glass slipped from my trembling fingers. It hit the hardwood floor and shattered into 100 pieces. The loud crash echoed through the room like a gunshot. Mark and Chloe practically jumped off each other. Mark's face went completely pale. He scrambled backward, his eyes wide with absolute panic. "Sarah!" he stammered, pulling his shirt together. "Sarah, wait! It's not what it looks like! Not what it looks like!" How many times have we heard that pathetic excuse in movies? But hearing it in real life, from the man who put a diamond ring on my finger just 2 hours ago, made me sick to my stomach. But you know what the worst part was? It wasn't Mark's pathetic panic. It was Chloe's reaction. My little sister didn't look guilty. She didn't cry. She didn't jump up to apologize. She simply pulled the bedsheet up over her chest, looked me dead in the eyes, and let out an annoyed sigh. Like I was the one interrupting her moment. I couldn't breathe. I felt like I was drowning. My throat was so tight I couldn't even force a scream out of my mouth. "How long?" I whispered. My voice was broken, barely audible. "How long has this been going on?" Mark looked down at the floor, unable to meet my eyes. 6 months, he mumbled. 6 months. For half a year, the man I loved and the sister I grew up with had been sleeping together behind my back. Every family dinner, every weekend trip, every time she smiled at me and called him her future brother-in-law, they were mocking me. They were laughing at me. Tears finally spilled over my eyelashes, ruining my makeup, dropping onto my beautiful emerald green dress. I didn't say another word to them. I couldn't. I turned around and ran out of that room. I ran down the long hallway, my heels clicking frantically against the floor. Let me ask you one last thing for this chapter. When you get deeply hurt, when someone completely destroys you, what is your first primal instinct? You run to your parents, right? You run to your mother. You think, my parents will protect me. My parents will fix this. That's exactly what I thought. I ran down those stairs, crying hysterically, pushing through the crowd of guests in the backyard until I found my mother and father. I thought they would march upstairs, grab Mark by the collar, and throw him and Chloe out into the street. I thought they would wrap their arms around me and tell me everything was going to be okay. But I was so naive. I had absolutely no idea that the betrayal in that bedroom was nothing compared to the brutal heartbreak my parents were about to hand me. Let's pick up right where we left off. I was running down that grand wooden staircase, my vision completely blurred by tears. Outside, in the backyard, the jazz band was still playing that cheerful, upbeat music. People were laughing, clinking their champagne glasses, celebrating my engagement. The contrast between the happy party outside and the absolute nightmare inside my chest was suffocating. Have you ever felt completely invisible in a room full of people? Like your world is literally burning to the ground, but everyone else is just smiling and drinking wine? That's exactly how I felt. I pushed through the glass patio doors and frantically searched the crowd. Finally, I saw them. My mother and father were standing near the buffet table, chatting with some wealthy business partners. I didn't care about making a scene anymore. I ran up to them, grabbed my mother's arm, and pulled her away. My father quickly followed, noticing my ruined makeup and shaking hands. I dragged them into my father's private study and slammed the heavy mahogany doors shut, cutting off the sound of the party. I was hyperventilating. I couldn't even form a proper sentence. "Sarah, what on earth is wrong with you?" My mother snapped, fixing her diamond necklace. "You are ruining your dress. The guests are going to see you." "Mark!" I choked out, gasping for air. "Mark and Chloe. Mom, Dad, they are upstairs." In the guest room. Together. I saw them. I saw them kissing on the bed. I waited for the gasp. I waited for my father's face to turn red with anger. I waited for my mother to cover her mouth in absolute shock and tell me that we were going to kick them both out of the house immediately. But I want you to listen to me very carefully right now, because what happened next is the exact moment my heart permanently turned to ice. There was no gasp. There was no anger. My parents just looked at each other. A long, quiet, uncomfortable look. It wasn't the look of parents who had just discovered a horrible betrayal. It was the look of two people who had just been caught hiding a dirty secret. "You knew," I whispered, stepping back as a cold shiver ran down my spine. "Oh my God, you knew?" My father cleared his throat and looked away, refusing to meet my eyes. My mother, however, stepped forward. She didn't hug me. She didn't wipe my tears. She just looked at me with this chilling, calculated calmness. "Sarah, please lower your voice," my mother said. "We didn't know anything for sure, but we had our suspicions. Chloe has been very attached to Mark lately." "Attached!" I screamed, the betrayal tearing through my chest. "Mom, he is my fiancé. He put a ring on my finger 2 hours ago, and he is sleeping with my little sister." And then my mother said the words that I will remember until the day I die. "Sarah, listen to me," she said smoothly, placing a cold hand on my shoulder. "You have always been the strong one. You are independent. You have your career. You can survive anything. But your sister, Chloe, is fragile. She is deeply in love with Mark. And honestly, Mark's family business aligns much better with Chloe's lifestyle. You just need to be the bigger person here. You need to adjust and let them be." I want you to pause the video for a second and just think about that. Can you even imagine your own mother looking you in the eyes on the night of your engagement and telling you to step aside so your sister can have your fiancé? Just because your sister is the fragile golden child? I felt physically sick. I looked at my father, begging him silently to defend me. "Dad, are you going to let her say this? Are you going to let them do this to me?" My father finally looked at me, but there was no love in his eyes. There was only business. "Sarah, be reasonable," my father said with a heavy sigh. "Mark's father and I are about to close a massive real estate merger. If we cancel this engagement and create a massive public scandal tonight, our stock prices will tank. Chloe and Mark have a connection. We will quietly call off your engagement tomorrow, and in a few months, we will announce Mark and Chloe's relationship. It keeps the business merger intact. Please, don't be selfish and ruin this family's reputation." I wasn't a daughter to them. I was just a pawn in their public relations game. My pain meant absolutely nothing compared to their bank accounts and Chloe's happiness. Just then, the study doors slowly opened. Mark and Chloe walked in. Mark looked like a pathetic coward, staring at his shoes. But Chloe? She walked right past me, went straight to my mother, and started crying fake tears. "I'm so sorry, Sarah," Chloe sniffled, hiding behind our mother. "We didn't mean to hurt you. We just fell in love. You can't control who you love, right? I knew you would understand." She was wearing a smirk, a tiny, victorious smirk right behind her fake tears. She had wanted my life, and my parents had just handed it to her on a silver platter. I took off my diamond engagement ring. My hand wasn't shaking anymore. I walked up to Mark, threw the ring directly at his chest, and watched it bounce off him and hit the floor. "You deserve each other," I said softly. I turned around to walk out of the room, but my father's voice stopped me. "Sarah," he said coldly, "there are 200 guests out there. If you walk out crying, people will ask questions. It is best if you don't stay here tonight. Go pack a bag. Go stay at a hotel for a few days until things calm down. We don't want you causing a scene." They were kicking me out. The girl who got cheated on, the girl whose heart was just shattered, was being thrown out into the night so the cheaters could enjoy the rest of the party. I didn't argue. I didn't scream. When someone shows you who they truly are, you believe them. I walked upstairs, packed a single suitcase with whatever clothes I could fit, and walked out the back door. As I drove my car out of the massive iron gates of my family's estate, I looked in the rearview mirror. I watched the fairy lights glowing in the dark. I watched the house where I took my first steps, the house where I thought I was loved. I had no fiancé. I had no sister. I had no parents. I had absolutely nothing. But as I drove into the cold, dark night, crying until my lungs burned, a new feeling started to grow inside me. It wasn't sadness anymore. It was pure, unfiltered rage. They thought they had destroyed me. They thought I would quietly disappear and let them live their perfect, wealthy lives. They had absolutely no idea the kind of monster they had just created. Have you ever hit rock bottom? I don't just mean having a bad day or losing a job. I mean the kind of rock bottom where you are lying on a cold, hard floor at 3 a.m., staring at a cracked ceiling and wondering if you even have the strength to breathe anymore. That was me. The night I drove away from my parents' massive estate, I didn't go to a luxury hotel. I didn't want to use their credit cards anymore. I wanted absolutely nothing to do with their money, their name, or their fake reputation. I parked my car in an empty parking lot of a 24-hour diner, locked the doors, curled up in the back seat, and cried until the sun came up. A few days later, I rented a tiny, run-down studio apartment on the absolute worst side of the city. When I say tiny, I mean you could stand in the middle of the room and touch the kitchen sink and the bathroom door at the same time. It smelled like damp wood and old cigarettes. I couldn't even afford a real bed, so I bought a cheap, thin mattress from a thrift store and threw it directly on the floor. For the first 2 weeks, I was a ghost. I barely ate. I barely slept. My phone would occasionally buzz with texts from family friends, sending me links to social media posts. My sister, Chloe, wasted no time. Less than a month after I was thrown out, she and Mark went public. I remember opening my phone one night and seeing a picture of them standing in front of the Eiffel Tower in Paris. Mark had his arms wrapped around her waist, and Chloe was wearing a massive diamond ring. A ring that was easily twice the size of the one he had given me. Her caption read, "Sometimes the universe breaks your heart just to lead you to your true soulmate. #blessed true love." Let me ask you something. How do you not lose your mind when you see the people who destroyed you living their best lives while you are struggling to pay for a loaf of bread? It makes you question everything. It makes you wonder if karma is even real. But sitting on that thin mattress, holding my phone in the dark, something shifted inside me. I looked at that picture, and I didn't cry. My tears had completely dried up. Instead, a cold, sharp, and terrifying focus took over my brain. My mother had told me to step aside because Chloe was the fragile one, and I was the strong one. My father threw me away because Mark's family business was more valuable to him than his own daughter's happiness. They valued power. They valued money. Fine, I whispered to the empty room. I'll show you exactly how strong I can be. I'll show you what real power looks like. From that exact moment, the sad, heartbroken Sarah died, and a completely different woman was born. I didn't have funding. I didn't have wealthy connections anymore. But I had a background in software engineering, and I had an idea. For months before my engagement, I had been designing an advanced supply chain software algorithm. It was designed to help logistics companies track global shipments in real time, using predictive AI to save millions of dollars in lost cargo. I had once mentioned it to my father, and he laughed at me, calling it a cute little hobby. Well, this cute little hobby was going to be my weapon. I got a job working the night shift at a local call center. From 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., I answered angry customer phone calls. But the second my shift ended, I would walk back to my freezing apartment, sit on the floor with my old laptop, and code. I coded for 12, sometimes 14 hours a day. My back ached, my eyes were constantly bloodshot, and my diet consisted mostly of instant noodles and cheap black coffee. There were days when I wanted to quit. Days when my bank account was down to exactly $4. One rainy afternoon, the power in my apartment got shut off because I couldn't pay the bill. I sat in the dark, shivering under a blanket, and I thought about calling my mother. I thought about begging them to let me come home. But then I remembered the smirk on Chloe's face. I remembered my father telling me not to cause a scene so they wouldn't lose their business deal. I put my phone away, went to a public library with free Wi-Fi, plugged in my laptop, and kept coding. For an entire year, I lived like a machine. I didn't date. I didn't go out. I didn't buy a single piece of new clothing. Every single ounce of my energy was poured into building my software. And then, finally, the prototype was ready. It was flawless. It worked faster and more efficiently than any other logistics software on the market. But having a great product means nothing if you can't get it in front of the right people. I started cold emailing hundreds of venture capitalists, tech investors, and logistics CEOs. For 2 months, all I got was silence. Or worse, rejection emails. Not interested. Too risky. We don't fund startups with no track record. I was running out of time. I was running out of money. The desperation was starting to claw at my throat again. But if life has taught me anything, it's that the universe likes to test you right up until the absolute breaking point. Because exactly 1 week before I would have been evicted from my apartment and forced onto the streets, my phone rang. It was a California area code. I cleared my throat, trying to sound professional, and answered. "Hello, is this Sarah?" A crisp, deep voice asked. "My name is David Vance. I'm the senior managing partner at Horizon Ventures. We reviewed the software demo you sent us. My heart completely stopped. Horizon Ventures was one of the most ruthless and powerful investment firms in Silicon Valley. I'll be honest with you, Sarah," David continued. "Your presentation was terrible. Your pitch deck looked like a college project." My stomach dropped. I closed my eyes, preparing for the rejection. "But," he said, pausing for a moment, "we ran your source code through our simulation models last night, and I have never seen anything like it. It is absolutely brilliant. We want to fly you out to San Francisco tomorrow morning. We want to talk numbers." I couldn't speak. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely hold the phone. "Sarah, are you there?" "Yes," I whispered, a tear finally escaping my eye. But it was a tear of absolute victory. "I'll be there." I hung up the phone and looked around my tiny, miserable apartment. I looked at the thin mattress on the floor. I looked at the instant noodle cups in the trash. I took a deep breath. My family had buried me in the dirt. But they didn't realize I was a seed, and the harvest was finally about to begin. If you have never been on a flight to Silicon Valley with literally nothing to your name except a laptop and a dream, let me tell you, it is a terrifying feeling. I remember sitting in that airplane seat, looking out the window at the clouds. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it was going to burst out of my chest. I was wearing a cheap, off-the-rack suit I bought from a discount store. My shoes were slightly scuffed. I felt like an absolute imposter. But as the plane touched down in San Francisco, I took a deep breath, looked at my reflection in the dark airplane window, and whispered to myself, "You survived your family. You can survive this." Walking into the headquarters of Horizon Ventures felt like stepping onto another planet. The building was all glass and steel, filled with people wearing designer clothes, walking around with intense purpose. I was escorted into a massive glass boardroom on the 40th floor, overlooking the entire city. Sitting at the long mahogany table were 5 older men in sharp suits. At the head of the table was David Vance, the man who had called me. He didn't offer a warm smile. He didn't offer small talk. He just leaned forward, folded his hands, and looked right into my eyes. "Your software algorithm claims it can reduce global shipping delays by 22%, David said, his voice cold and analytical. "If that number is real, you are sitting on a gold mine. If it's fake, you are wasting our time." "Which one is it, Sarah? Let me ask you something. When you are sitting in a room full of powerful people, people who hold the keys to your future, do you shrink yourself? Do you play it safe?" A year ago, the old Sarah would have been intimidated. She would have stumbled over her words. But the girl who was thrown out of her own home by her parents, the girl who slept on a thin mattress and coded for 14 hours a day, she didn't know how to be scared anymore. I stood up. I walked over to the projector, plugged in my cheap laptop, and pulled up the live simulation. "I am not here to waste your time, Mr. Vance," I said smoothly, my voice completely steady. "I don't just claim it reduces delays by 22%. I claim it reduces operational costs by 30%, and I can prove it to you right now." For the next 2 hours, I didn't just present my software. I owned that room. I answered every single aggressive question they threw at me. I showed them the math. I showed them the AI models. By the time I closed my laptop, the room was dead silent. David Vance leaned back in his leather chair. He looked at the other men at the table, who all gave tiny, almost invisible nods. Then, he looked back at me. "We are going to offer you $2 million in seed funding," David said flatly, "for 30% equity in your company. $2 million. For a girl who had exactly $47 left in her checking account, $2 million sounded like a fantasy. My brain screamed at me to say yes immediately, to jump across the table and shake his hand. But then, a memory flashed in my mind. I remembered my father. I remembered how he built his empire by taking advantage of desperate startups, bullying them into giving up their equity until he owned them completely. I knew the corporate game. If I gave them 30% now, they would slowly strip away my control until I was just an employee in my own company. I looked David dead in the eyes. I didn't smile. $5 million, I said quietly, for 15% equity. And I retain absolute voting control of the board. One of the junior partners actually scoffed, shaking his head. "You have 0 market presence. You have no team. You are a one-woman show living in a studio apartment. $5 million is ridiculous." I didn't break eye contact with David. "I am a one-woman show who just built an algorithm your entire team of Stanford engineers couldn't figure out. You need my software more than I need your money. If you don't want the deal, I will walk out of this room right now and take it to your biggest competitor down the street. It's your call." The silence in the boardroom was so thick you could cut it with a knife. My hands were sweating so badly inside my pockets, but my face was like a stone wall. David stared at me for a long, intense moment. And then he smiled. A genuine, terrifying shark-like smile. "I like you, Sarah," he said. "You have fangs. Fine. $5 million, 15%. We will have the lawyers draft the contracts by this afternoon." I walked out of that building a few hours later with a signed term sheet in my hand. The cold San Francisco wind hit my face, and for the first time in an entire year, I took a full, deep breath. I didn't cry. I didn't jump up and down. I just walked to a quiet coffee shop, ordered an espresso, and pulled out my phone. Before I tell you what I did next, I want to take a quick second to talk to you directly. If you have been listening to my story this far, it means you know exactly what it feels like to be underestimated. It means you know what it feels like to fight your way out of the dark. If my journey is resonating with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to my channel. It takes a lot of courage to share these painful memories, and your support means everything to me. If you're watching on Facebook, please drop a follow and leave a comment below. Have you ever had to prove your family wrong? I read every single comment, and I want to hear your stories too. Now, back to the coffee shop. I opened my phone and went straight to Chloe's social media profile. She had just posted a new picture. It was her and Mark standing on the balcony of a beautiful new house. The caption read, "Just bought our first home together. Daddy helped with the down payment. So lucky to have a family that supports us." I stared at the picture. My father had bought them a house. He had rewarded their betrayal with luxury. I took a sip of my black coffee. I didn't feel angry anymore. Anger is a weak emotion. What I felt was much more dangerous. I felt absolute, terrifying patience. "Enjoy the house, Chloe," I whispered to my phone screen. "Enjoy the money, because I am coming for all of it." The seed funding was just the beginning. The sad, broken sister was officially dead. The CEO had arrived, and the true empire was about to be built. Fast forward 3 years. 3 years is an interesting amount of time. If you use it to complain about your ex, complain about your family, complain about how unfair the world is, 3 years will pass and you will be exactly where you started. But if you take that pain, bottle it up, and use it as fuel, 3 years is enough time to conquer the world. Let me paint a picture for you of what my life looked like 3 years after that meeting in Silicon Valley. I was no longer sleeping on a thin mattress on the floor. I woke up every morning in a stunning, minimalist penthouse overlooking the city skyline. I drove a custom-ordered matte black Porsche. I wore tailored designer suits that fit perfectly. And I walked into a massive corporate headquarters where 300 employees called me boss. My logistics software didn't just succeed, it completely disrupted the industry. Major global shipping companies, international airlines, and e-commerce giants all relied on my algorithm to run their daily operations. We went from a $5 million valuation to 20 million, then 50 million. And finally, on a rainy Tuesday morning, my chief financial officer walked into my office and handed me the official independent audit report. I opened the file. The total valuation of my company had officially crossed $100 million. $100 million. I remember sitting at my large oak desk, staring at those zeros. I was 28 years old, and I was worth more than my father's entire legacy combined. The media wanted to interview me. Magazines wanted to put me on their covers, calling me the next great female tech titan. But I refused. I hired a brilliant PR team with one specific instruction: keep my face out of the media. I didn't want magazine covers. I didn't want the fame. I operated entirely in the shadows under the corporate name Aegis Innovations. Only a very exclusive circle of high-level investors knew the face behind the company. I wanted to remain a ghost to the outside world. Why? Because I knew that if my family saw my face on Forbes, they would instantly try to crawl back into my life, pretending they had always supported me. And I wasn't ready to deal with them yet. I was waiting for the perfect moment. And as it turns out, the universe has a very twisted sense of humor. Because while I was quietly building a $100 million fortress, Mark and Chloe's perfect, golden life was rapidly burning to the ground. I never actively searched for information about them. I didn't need to. In the high-level business circles I now operated in, rumors spread faster than wildfire. My father's business, the one he had chosen over his own daughter, had taken a massive hit due to a severe crash in the commercial real estate market. He was bleeding money, but the real disaster was Mark. Do you remember how my mother said Mark's family business was better aligned with Chloe's lifestyle? Well, Mark's father had passed away 2 years ago, leaving Mark in complete control of their supply chain logistics company. And Mark, the man who couldn't even stay loyal to his fiancé, turned out to be an absolute failure of a CEO. He was arrogant. He made terrible investments. He tried to expand too fast, taking out massive, high-interest loans to fund a luxurious lifestyle for him and Chloe. They were throwing lavish parties, flying first class to Europe, and buying expensive cars, all while his company's core infrastructure was rotting from the inside. One evening, I was sitting in my penthouse, drinking a glass of wine, when I received a highly confidential email from my lead acquisitions manager, Robert. The subject line simply read, "Potential acquisition target." I opened the email. Robert had attached a detailed financial dossier of a failing logistics company that was desperately looking for a bailout. The company was drowning in $15 million of toxic debt. If they didn't secure a buyout within the next 30 days, the bank was going to seize all their assets, liquidate the company, and the CEO would likely face federal charges for financial negligence. I scrolled down to read the name of the failing company, Caldwell Logistics, Mark's company. I froze. I set my wine glass down on the marble counter. I leaned closer to my laptop, reading the attached notes. Mark had been secretly sending out desperation pitches to larger tech firms, begging someone, anyone, to buy his failing company and absorb his debt so he wouldn't go to prison. He had no idea who owned Aegis Innovations. To him, we were just a massive, faceless corporate giant holding billions in cash. So, he had sent his bailout pitch directly to us. I stared at the screen for a very long time. A slow, chilling smile crept across my face. For 3 years, I had focused only on building my empire. I had told myself that success was the best revenge. But suddenly, looking at Mark's desperate plea for help, success wasn't enough anymore. I didn't want to just be successful. I wanted to watch them realize exactly who held the power. I picked up my phone and called Robert. He answered on the second ring. "Robert?" I said softly. "I am looking at the Caldwell Logistics file." "Yes, boss," Robert replied. "It's a terrible deal. The company is basically worthless. They are drowning in debt. I was going to send them an official rejection letter tomorrow morning." "No," I said, my voice dropping to a cold, calculated tone. "Don't reject them. You want to acquire them?" Robert asked, sounding incredibly confused. "Sarah, it's a sinking ship. I don't want to acquire them, Robert. I want to play with them," I said. "Send Mark Caldwell an email. Tell him the mysterious CEO of Aegis Innovations is highly interested in a full buyout. Tell him we are willing to clear his debt and save his lifestyle." "Okay," Robert said slowly. "And then what?" "And then," I smiled, "we invite him and his entire family to our headquarters to sign the final paperwork. Tell him the CEO insists on meeting his wife and his in-laws to finalize the family trust aspects of the deal." I hung up the phone. I walked over to the floor-to-ceiling windows of my penthouse and looked down at the glittering city lights below. The trap was officially set. Mark and Chloe thought a faceless billionaire was about to save their lives. They had absolutely no idea they were walking straight into the jaws of the woman they had destroyed 3 years ago. "Before we get to the trap I set, I need to take you behind closed doors. I need to show you what was actually happening inside the perfect marriage of Mark and Chloe. Because on social media, they looked like royalty. If you scrolled through Chloe's Instagram, you would see pictures of them drinking champagne on private yachts, wearing matching designer watches, and kissing in front of a massive mansion. She was still pushing that same narrative. True love always wins. But social media is a liar. And karma? Karma doesn't care about your Instagram filters. Through my corporate intelligence team, I had gathered a complete profile on Mark's current life. And the reality behind their glowing pictures was absolutely pathetic. Mark wasn't a businessman. He was a boy playing dress-up in his dead father's suit. When his father passed away, Mark inherited a solid, profitable company. But instead of working hard, he treated the corporate bank account like his own personal ATM. He wanted to impress my parents. He wanted to prove to Chloe that he could give her an even better life than my father could. So, he started taking out massive, high-interest commercial loans. He bought Chloe a customized Range Rover. He bought her diamond necklaces. He threw parties that cost hundreds of thousands of dollars just to show off to their wealthy friends. But you can only fake it for so long before the bank comes knocking. By their second year of marriage, the money completely dried up. Mark's logistics company was failing miserably because he hadn't updated their technology in years. Clients were leaving, employees were quitting, and the bank was demanding their loan payments. I want you to imagine the panic in that house. Imagine Chloe, the spoiled golden child who had never worked a day in her life, suddenly realizing that her credit cards were declining at the mall. According to the private investigators my team hired to background check Caldwell Logistics, the tension between Mark and Chloe had become incredibly toxic. They were screaming at each other constantly. Mark blamed Chloe for spending too much money. Chloe blamed Mark for being a failure and not providing for her the way our father did. And speaking of my father, he couldn't save them. My parents had always bailed Chloe out of trouble. But my father's own real estate business had taken a massive hit. He was struggling to keep his own head above water. When Mark went to my father begging for a $2 million loan to stop the bank from seizing his house, my father looked him in the eye and said, "I don't have it." For the first time in her entire life, Chloe had no safety net, no rich daddy to save her, no big sister to clean up her mess. She was stuck in a sinking ship with a man she only loved because of his wallet. The pressure broke Mark. He started making desperate, illegal decisions. To hide how much money his company was losing, Mark started cooking the books. He falsified financial reports to secure even more loans, hoping he could use the new money to pay off the old debt. It's a classic Ponzi scheme mindset. But the federal auditors eventually caught on. That was why Mark was desperately trying to sell his company. He wasn't just trying to save his house anymore. He was trying to avoid federal prison for corporate fraud. He needed a massive tech giant to buy his company, absorb his toxic debt, and sweep his illegal accounting under the rug before the FBI officially filed charges. And that is exactly why he sent his bailout pitch to my company, Aegis Innovations. He didn't know the CEO was me. He just saw a faceless, $100 million tech empire and thought, this is my golden ticket. When my acquisitions manager, Robert, sent the email to Mark, stating that the CEO was highly interested in buying him out and clearing his debt, Mark took the bait instantly. Robert told me that Mark actually cried on the phone when he received the offer. He was so desperate, so broken, that he didn't even negotiate. He agreed to every single term we put in the preliminary contract. Robert told Mark over the phone, "Our CEO is very old school. They don't just buy businesses, they buy legacies. The CEO insists that you bring your wife and her parents to the final signing at our headquarters. They want to ensure the entire family is aligned with the transition." Mark was ecstatic. He probably thought the old-school CEO was some 70-year-old billionaire who just wanted a nice family dinner before handing over a massive check. "Absolutely," Mark told Robert. "My wife and my in-laws will be there. We are a very close, loving family." When Robert relayed that message to me, I actually laughed out loud in my office. A close, loving family. The irony was almost too sweet to handle. The meeting was set for Friday at 2 p.m. I spent the entire week preparing. I didn't just want to reject him. I wanted to break him psychologically. I wanted them to walk into my building feeling like kings and queens, only to realize they were absolutely nothing. I ordered a brand new, custom-tailored white designer suit for the meeting. White? Because I wanted to look like an absolute angel of death. I had my legal team draft a brutal, airtight contract that explicitly detailed Mark's financial fraud, just in case he tried to deny it. On Thursday night, the night before the meeting, I stood on the balcony of my penthouse, looking out at the city. The cold wind was blowing through my hair. I thought about the night I was thrown out of my parents' house. I thought about sleeping on that thin mattress, shivering in the cold, eating instant noodles while my sister paraded around Paris with my fiancé. I thought about my mother telling me to step aside because Chloe was the fragile one. I stepped aside. "Mom," I whispered to the empty air. And look what happened to her. Tomorrow, the 3-year wait would finally be over. Tomorrow, I wasn't going to be the sad, heartbroken girl crying in the hallway. Tomorrow, I was going to be the executioner. The golden couple was about to walk right into my boardroom, and I was going to lock the doors. Friday morning arrived. the day of the meeting. When I woke up that morning, I didn't feel nervous. I didn't feel anxious. I felt completely, terrifyingly calm. It's a strange feeling when you have waited 3 entire years for a single moment, and it is finally standing right in front of you. I took a long shower. I put on the custom-tailored white designer suit I had bought specifically for today. I wore my hair slicked back, clean and sharp. I put on a pair of stiletto heels that clicked with authority on the hardwood floor. When I looked in the mirror, I didn't see the girl who cried in the hallway. I saw a CEO, $100 million titan. I drove my matte black Porsche to the Aegis Innovations headquarters. Our building was an imposing, ultra-modern glass tower right in the heart of the business district. I walked into the lobby, and the security guards immediately stood up straight. "Good morning, boss," they said in unison. I gave them a slight nod and took the private executive elevator straight to the top floor. My lead acquisitions manager, Robert, was waiting for me outside the grand boardroom. "Are they here?" I asked, my voice flat. Robert checked his tablet and smiled. "They just pulled into the VIP parking garage. They are on their way up to the reception area now." "Perfect," I said, adjusting my blazer. "Put them in the main boardroom. Offer them espresso. Give them the preliminary contract to read. Let them get comfortable. I will come in exactly 10 minutes after they sit down." Robert nodded and walked away to greet them. I went into my private office and opened my laptop. I had direct access to the hidden security cameras inside the main boardroom. I clicked on the live feed, and there they were. The heavy glass doors opened, and Mark walked in first, followed by Chloe, and then my mother and father. Seeing them on the screen after 3 years, it was a surreal experience. They had aged. The stress of impending bankruptcy had definitely taken its toll on my parents. My father looked tired, his shoulders slumped. My mother was wearing a vintage Chanel dress, trying desperately to look wealthy and relevant, but she kept nervously playing with her hands. But Chloe and Mark? They were putting on the performance of a lifetime. Mark was wearing a sharp, clearly rented tuxedo. He was trying to puff out his chest and act like a successful CEO making a billion-dollar merger. Chloe was wearing an expensive, flashy dress, holding a designer bag, looking around the massive, luxurious boardroom with absolute greed in her eyes. She walked over to the floor-to-ceiling windows, looking down at the city below, and I heard her voice through the audio feed. "Mark, this place is incredible," Chloe whispered, smiling brightly. "Once we secure this buyout, we are going to be set for life. Daddy was right. This CEO is our golden ticket." My father sat down in one of the plush leather chairs, letting out a heavy sigh of relief. "Just let Mark do the talking, Chloe. Don't ruin this. If this CEO absorbs Caldwell Logistics, we can use the leftover capital to save my real estate firm too. This is the reset button we needed." I sat in my office, watching them on the screen, listening to their conversation. It was honestly pathetic. They were still the exact same selfish, greedy people they were 3 years ago. They didn't care about the employees who would lose their jobs. They didn't care about the fraud Mark had committed. They just wanted the money to keep funding their fake, luxurious lives. Robert walked into the boardroom, carrying a silver tray with 4 espresso cups and a thick, leather-bound folder. "Good afternoon, everyone," Robert said professionally, setting the folder down in front of Mark. "Our CEO will be joining you shortly. In the meantime, please review the final buyout agreement. It outlines the complete absorption of your $15 million debt, as well as the cash payout for your remaining shares." Mark practically snatched the folder off the table. He opened it, and his eyes widened. I knew exactly what he was looking at. He was looking at the blank check we had drafted, a number so large it would instantly erase all his problems and make him a multimillionaire again. This is incredibly generous," Mark said, his voice actually trembling with relief. He looked at my parents with a massive, victorious smile. "We did it. We are saved." Chloe clapped her hands together, practically bouncing in her chair. "Oh my God, Mark, I can finally get that summer house in Aspen!" I closed the laptop. The time for watching was over. The time for execution had arrived. "Let me ask you something before I walk through those boardroom doors. Have you ever imagined what it would feel like to hold the absolute power over the people who broke you? To know that with one single word, you could either give them the world or take away everything they have left? I stood up from my desk. I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel sad. I felt a cold, chilling sense of absolute control. I walked out of my private office and headed slowly down the long glass hallway toward the boardroom. My stiletto heels clicked rhythmically against the polished marble floor. Click, click, click. Every step was a reminder of the tears I cried in my car 3 years ago. Every step was a reminder of the 14-hour coding sessions on the floor of a freezing apartment. I reached the heavy, frosted glass doors of the boardroom. Through the glass, I could see their blurry silhouettes. They were laughing. They were celebrating their victory. They thought they had won. I placed my hand on the metal door handle. I took one final, deep breath. And then I pushed the doors wide open. The heavy glass doors swung open. The laughter inside the boardroom instantly stopped. Mark, Chloe, and my parents all turned their heads toward the door, plastering big, fake, professional smiles on their faces, ready to greet the mysterious billionaire CEO who was about to save their lives. I stepped into the room. I didn't say a word. I just stood at the head of the long mahogany table, wearing my pristine white suit, looking dead at them. For the first 3 seconds, absolute silence hung in the air. Their brains couldn't process what their eyes were seeing. They were expecting a 70-year-old corporate giant. Instead, they were looking at the daughter and sister they had thrown away like trash 3 years ago. My mother's fake smile slowly melted off her face. The espresso cup in my father's hand started to visibly tremble, making a quiet clinking sound against the saucer. Mark's face lost all of its color. He looked like he had just seen a ghost. But Chloe was the first one to speak. "Sarah?" she whispered, her voice cracking in absolute confusion. She looked around the massive, luxurious boardroom, then looked back at my tailored suit. What? What are you doing here? Did you get a job here as an assistant or something?" I almost laughed. Even in the face of impossible evidence, her spoiled brain still tried to put me beneath her. I slowly pulled out the high-backed leather chair at the head of the table. I didn't sit down immediately. I placed my hands flat on the polished wood, leaned forward slightly, and looked directly into Mark's terrified eyes. "I am not an assistant, Chloe," I said, my voice dangerously calm and echoing clearly through the massive room. "I am the founder and chief executive officer of Aegis Innovations, and you are sitting in my building." If someone had dropped a bomb in that room, the shock would have been less severe. My father literally dropped his espresso cup. It shattered on the table, hot coffee spilling everywhere, but he didn't even notice. He was staring at me, his jaw completely unhinged. That's impossible," Mark stammered, frantically looking at the thick leather folder on the table. "Aegis Innovations is a $100 million company. You were living in a studio apartment. You had nothing. I had nothing because you took it from me, Mark," I replied coldly, finally sitting down in the CEO chair. I crossed my legs and looked at the 4 of them. "But I didn't stay there. I built an empire while you were busy bankrupting your dead father's company to buy my sister designer bags." The realization hit them like a freight train. The faceless billionaire, who was going to buy their $15 million toxic debt and save them from federal prison, was me. They had literally walked directly into the slaughterhouse, and I was holding the axe. My mother, who had sat in chilling silence this entire time, suddenly snapped into survival mode. She did what she always did. She tried to manipulate the situation. "Sarah, oh my God, Sarah," she gasped, standing up and putting her hands over her mouth, faking absolute joy. "Look at you! Look at what you've built! We had no idea! Your father and I, we are so incredibly proud of you." I stared at her. The absolute audacity of this woman was sickening. Let me ask you something. How do you respond to the woman who gave birth to you? The woman who told you to step aside so your sister could sleep with your fiancé, when she suddenly pretends to be a proud mother just because you have money? I didn't yell. I just tilted my head and smiled a cold, razor-sharp smile. "Sit down, Mother," I commanded. My voice wasn't loud, but it carried so much authority that she instantly stopped talking and slowly sank back into her chair, her face turning pale. Chloe, however, couldn't handle it. The golden child was realizing that she was no longer the most important person in the room. The power dynamic had completely shifted, and she was terrified. She stood up from her chair, tears, real tears this time, welling up in her eyes. She walked around the table and stopped a few feet away from me. "Sarah, please," Chloe sobbed, her voice trembling with desperation. "You have to help us. Mark's company is completely under. If you don't sign this buyout agreement today, the bank is going to take our house. They are going to take everything. Mark might go to jail for the accounting errors. Please, Sarah, I'm your little sister." "My little sister?" I repeated softly, letting the words hang in the air. "Yes!" Chloe cried, taking a step closer, clasping her hands together like she was begging a queen for mercy. "I know what we did 3 years ago was wrong. I know we hurt you, and I am so, so sorry. But you are so successful now. You have $100 million. You don't even need Mark's company. You can just absorb the debt and it won't even affect you. Please, Sarah, be the bigger person. Save our family. Be the bigger person. Save our family." I looked at Chloe. I looked at the diamond necklace around her neck, the one Mark bought with stolen company funds. I looked at Mark, shivering in his rented tuxedo. I looked at my parents, who were holding their breath, waiting for me to be the good daughter and bail them out. I slowly stood up from my chair. I walked over to the leather folder sitting in front of Mark. I picked it up. "You're right, Chloe," I said softly, tracing my finger over the buyout contract. "I have $100 million. I could sign this paper right now. I could clear your $15 million debt, save your mansion, and keep Mark out of federal prison. I could do it with a single stroke of my pen." Chloe's eyes lit up with wild hope. Mark let out a massive sigh of relief, thinking he had actually survived. My father even smiled. "Oh, thank you! Sarah, thank you!" Chloe cried, reaching out to hug me. I took a sharp step back, putting my hand up to stop her. "Don't touch me," I snapped, the coldness in my voice freezing her in her tracks. I looked down at the contract in my hands, the contract that meant their survival, the contract they were begging for. And then, while maintaining dead eye contact with my sister, I grabbed the thick stack of papers and I ripped them completely in half. The sound of tearing paper echoed loudly in the silent boardroom. Chloe screamed. Mark jumped out of his chair. I threw the torn pieces of the contract directly onto the center of the mahogany table. "I didn't bring you here to save you," I whispered, my voice dripping with absolute venom. "I brought you here to watch you drown." I threw the torn pieces of the contract directly onto the center of the mahogany table. Chloe let out a breathless, horrified gasp, covering her mouth with both hands. Mark stumbled backward, his knees hitting the chair behind him. My father jumped up, his face turning a furious shade of red. "Sarah, have you lost your mind?" my father shouted, pointing a shaking finger at me. "This isn't a game. Do you realize what you just did? You just condemned Mark's company to bankruptcy. You are destroying your own family over a petty 3-year-old grudge. Let me pause the story right here and ask you a question. When toxic people get caught, what is the very first thing they do? They play the victim. They try to make you feel guilty for reacting to their abuse." My father was standing there, screaming at me, trying to make me feel like a monster for not saving the man who cheated on me with my own sister. I didn't shout back. When you have the absolute power in a room, you don't need to raise your voice. I calmly walked back to my chair at the head of the table. I picked up a sleek black remote control, pointed it at the massive glass wall behind me, and pressed a button. The blinds slowly lowered, darkening the room, and a massive 4K projector screen lit up the wall. "Sit down, Dad," I said, my voice cutting through his anger like a knife. Because the truth is, Mark's company isn't going bankrupt because of me. It's going bankrupt because Mark is a criminal. And I'm about to show you exactly why none of you are walking out of here with a single dollar of my money. I pressed the clicker in my hand. A highly detailed, confidential bank statement flashed onto the massive screen. The numbers were highlighted in bright red. Mark looked at the screen, and I watched the absolute terror wash over his face. He knew exactly what that document was. "Let's look at Exhibit A," I said, pacing slowly alongside the table. 14 months ago, Caldwell Logistics was already failing. But instead of cutting your losses, Mark, you fabricated your quarterly revenue reports. You lied to the federal bank, claiming a 20% profit margin to secure a massive commercial loan of $5 million. That's not true, Mark stammered, his voice cracking. "You hacked my servers! This is illegal!" "No, Mark," I smiled coldly. "When you sent my acquisitions team your financial records begging for a buyout, you forgot that my AI software scans for hidden anomalies. We didn't hack you. We just read the very bad lies you submitted to us." I pressed the clicker again. A new slide appeared. It was a series of wire transfers from the corporate account to a personal offshore account. "Exhibit B," I continued, looking directly at my sister. "Where did that $5 million go? Did it go into saving the company? Did it go to paying the employees?" "No, it went into a private account. And the very next week, you bought a $2 million summer home, a customized Range Rover, and 3 Cartier diamond watches." Chloe looked down at her lap, her face completely pale, realizing that I knew every single dirty secret she thought was hidden. "You didn't build a life, Chloe," I whispered, walking up and standing right behind her chair. "You built a house of cards using stolen money. And now, the wind is blowing." My father was completely silent. He was a businessman. He knew exactly what these documents meant. This wasn't just bad business. This was Class A federal fraud. "Sarah," my father said, his voice completely stripped of its previous anger. He sounded weak. He sounded defeated. "If these documents get out, Mark won't just go bankrupt. He will face 20 years in federal prison." "I know," I replied, walking back to the head of the table. My mother finally stood up. Her eyes were filled with absolute panic. She walked toward me, tears streaming down her face. "Sarah, please listen to me," she cried, reaching out to grab my hand. "He made mistakes, but if he goes to jail, what will happen to Chloe? Your sister will be left with nothing. She will be on the streets. How can you be so cruel?" "How can you look at your own sister and let her life be destroyed?" I looked at the woman who gave birth to me, the woman who watched me cry on the night of my engagement and told me to pack my bags and leave my own home so I wouldn't ruin their party. I slowly pulled my hand away from her grasp. "Cruel?" I asked softly, the memories of sleeping on the floor suddenly rushing back to me. "Do you remember 3 years ago, Mom? Do you remember when I was begging you to help me, and you told me that Chloe was fragile and needed Mark more than I did? You told me to step aside." I leaned in closer to my mother, my voice trembling with the weight of 3 years of repressed pain. "I stepped aside, Mother. I walked out into the cold with nothing but a suitcase. I starved. I worked until my hands bled. And while I was doing that, you celebrated them. You bought them a house. You paraded them in front of our friends. You threw me away because you thought I was worthless." I looked at Mark, shivering in his chair, and then at Chloe, who was sobbing uncontrollably. "You chose him," I said, my voice echoing in the dead silence of the room. "You chose the criminal. You chose the cheater. You chose the fake legacy." I pressed the clicker one last time. The screen behind me changed. It was no longer financial documents. It was an email draft. The recipient was the Financial Crimes Division of the FBI. Attached to the email were all the fabricated bank statements and wire transfers. Mark let out a pathetic, suffocated gasp. "Sarah, no. Please," he begged, literally falling out of his chair onto his knees. "I will do anything. I will divorce her. I will give you whatever you want. Just please don't hit send." I looked down at the man I almost married. The man who was currently offering to divorce my sister just to save his own skin. He was a coward. He was always a coward. I looked at my father, my mother, my sister, and the pathetic man on the floor. "You came here begging me to save your lives," I said, my finger hovering over the final send button on my laptop. "But the truth is, I didn't invite you here to negotiate." I looked dead into Chloe's tear-filled eyes. "I invited you here for an execution." And with one swift, definitive motion, I pressed my finger down on the keyboard. Click. The email was sent. The moment I pressed that button, the air in the boardroom completely died. It was over. The fake empire, the stolen money, the arrogant smiles, all of it was wiped out with a single keystroke. Mark stayed on his knees, his head buried in his hands, openly weeping like a child. He knew that within the next 48 hours, federal agents would be knocking on the door of his mansion. Chloe was frozen in her chair, staring blankly at the screen, her makeup completely ruined by her tears. My father didn't say another word. He just slowly turned around, looking like a broken, defeated old man, and walked toward the glass doors. He knew there was nothing left to fight for. My mother tried to follow him, but she stopped, turning back to look at me one last time. "You will regret this, Sarah," she whispered, her voice shaking with venom. "You are going to end up completely alone." I stood up, adjusting my white blazer. I looked at her and smiled, a calm, peaceful smile. "I would rather be alone in a $100 million empire," I replied softly, "than sit at a dinner table surrounded by traitors." I pressed a button on the intercom on my desk. "Robert, please send security up to the boardroom. Our guests are ready to leave. Make sure they are escorted out of the building." I didn't wait to watch them get dragged out by security. I turned my back on them, walked out of the side door of the boardroom, and went straight to my private office. As I sat down in my chair and looked out the window at the beautiful city skyline, a heavy weight completely lifted off my shoulders. For 3 years, I had carried the ghost of that broken girl crying in the hallway. But today, that ghost was finally laid to rest. 2 weeks later, the news hit every major financial network in the country. Mark Caldwell was arrested on federal charges of corporate fraud and embezzlement. His company was seized, the assets were liquidated, and his perfect mansion was foreclosed by the bank. Chloe filed for divorce the very next day, proving exactly what kind of true love they really had. But without my parents' financial support, because my father's company officially filed for bankruptcy a month later, Chloe had nowhere to go. The golden child, who once wore Cartier watches and flew first class to Paris, had to move into a tiny, cramped apartment on the outskirts of the city, working as a junior receptionist just to pay her rent. And as for me, I didn't slow down. My company continued to grow. But more importantly, I started a foundation to help young, brilliant female entrepreneurs who come from nothing, who have been rejected or abandoned by their support systems. Because I know exactly what it feels like to sleep on a cold floor, wondering if you have the strength to survive the night. They thought they broke me. They thought they had buried me in the dirt. But they forgot one very important thing. I was a seed. And the dirt is exactly where I needed to be to grow into something unbreakable. And that brings us to the end of today's story. This wasn't just a story about revenge. It's a story about believing in yourself. There might come a time in your life when the people closest to you, the ones you love more than your own life, stab you in the back. They might break you so completely that you feel like there's absolutely no reason left to live. But always remember, the remote control of your life is not in anyone else's hands. Just because someone throws you away doesn't mean it's the end for you. In fact, that is exactly where your real journey begins. Turn your tears into power. One day, your sheer willpower and success will burn their arrogance to the ground. Thank you so much for staying with me and listening to the story of my life and this harsh truth for so long. I know that those of you who stayed with me until the very end truly listened to this story with your hearts. I just have one small request for you. If this story touched your heart, if my journey of bouncing back gave you even a little bit of courage today, please leave a like on this video. If you are watching this on YouTube, please show some love and subscribe to this small channel of ours. And if you are watching from Facebook, please hit that follow button and stay by my side. And please, don't forget to let me know your thoughts about this tough battle in the comments below. Have you ever experienced this kind of betrayal in your own life? How did you bounce back from it? Let me know in the comments. I read every single one of them. Take great care of yourselves and always believe in yourself. I will see you very soon with a brand new emotional story. Goodbye.